just gone 10 o'clock, so good morning ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for turning out and welcome to the 126th Annual General Meeting of the Grimsby Town Football Club PLC. I'm sure you're all familiar with the format that we try and adopt. The statutory meeting will run through and get out of the way, then we'll have a general open question and answer session afterwards. I'm sure you'll also bear with me as usual. I'll have to run through a little bit of procedure. All of the business on today's meeting is ordinary business, so everything is a straightforward majority. Initially on a show of hands, unless a poll vote is called for. The poll vote can be called for by the chairman of the meeting, by two shareholders together, or a shareholder having more than 10% of the issued share capital of the company. Other than that, with regards to the procedure, I don't think there's anything else that I need to add. So if I could perhaps open by asking you all for agreement that the notice of the meeting has been available and served for the requisite period of time, and that it's okay to proceed with the meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So item 1 on the agenda is the minutes of the 125th Annual General Meeting. Morning.
Morning, sorry.
That's quite all right. Could I first of all have a proposer and a seconder for the resolution to be discussed, please? Okay, thanks very much.
Can you get a seconder?
Oh, seconder. So, does anybody have any questions on the minutes of last year's AGM? Thank you very much. So all those in favour of adopting them or approving them? Anybody against? Thanks very much. Excuse me. Item 2 is the Director's Report and the Audited Accounts for the year ended 31st of May 2017. Again, a proposer and a seconder please for the resolution. And gentlemen, on the end, we'll have someone different, I think. No disrespect, we'll have someone different.
You do second difference.
Gentleman on the end. Is Mr. Green? Mr. Green? Yeah. So, opening the item for questions. Does anybody have any questions on last year's accounts? And I'll try my best to answer them. Yes?
Yes. I noticed trade debtors are up to about 850,000, which one would guess that a lot of it's money owing by Wigan, is that?
It was absolutely correct, yes.
That's right, is it?
Yeah, sorry, yes, carry on.
Has that now been paid off?
Yes, it has, yeah. Yes, David?
Are agents' fees counted in there as well?
No.
Or are they identified separate?
They are identified separate, yeah. In player trading, what you have in there is the actual cost of acquiring a player's registration. So if on acquiring that registration there are agents' fees involved, then that is included, because that is a cost directly associated with securing that player's registration. If you talk about agents' fees that then further down the line where they renegotiate the player's contract, you know, we either want to extend the contract or the contract has run down and they want a new contract with the club, those agents' fees do not go in player trading, because it's not a cost that's directly associated at that moment in time to the acquisition of registration. So yes, in the net figure for player trading, any agents' fees that have been paid are included in the write-down for the players' contracts, and you would look in intangible assets for that, and that's where that cost is. Okay. Oh.
Chairman, if I may just ask a question, please. There's been considerable scrutiny and misinformation regarding directors' loan repayments. The accounts 2016 cite 2.2097 million in terms of directors' loans. The following year, i.e. the current year we're talking about, it's gone down to 2 million. Could you please explain how that's come about and what it was relating to?
Yeah, I can. There were two elements to that. Prior to the trip to the 2015 playoff final, John put into the club some short-term temporary funding to enable the costs that we had to meet prior to going to Wembley out of cash flow. We had insufficient funds to be able to meet that expenditure. There are certain costs associated with being in the playoff final that you have to pay up front before you get the income. So John put in a temporary loan to the club to fund those expenses, and it was agreed that when the monies came back from Wembley, then he would have that money back. Not a problem. That is exactly what happened. So in the previous year's accounts, 2016, you've got the money going in. In the 2017 accounts, you've got the money coming out. There is another element included in that reduction. If you also recall, in the period of these accounts, Lee Mullen resigned from the board. He had made a loan to the club. That loan, quite naturally, after his resignation, cannot remain in directors' loans because he's no longer a director. So that loan has been removed from directors' loans and placed in other creditors. So that's £209,700 is made up of those two elements. The repayment of the temporary funding that John put in the previous year and the reallocation of Lee Mullen's loan to the club.
Thank you, Chairman.
Is that okay? Right, does anybody else have any other questions? Right, item 3 is to elect directors. Now, at this point in time, I'll hand the meeting over in a moment to John, because obviously it's myself and Philip are both up for re-election this year. It would clearly be inappropriate for me to chair the meeting during that process. The proposal is, however, that Philip and I be sought re-election on the basis of a block proposal. In other words, rather than dealing with us separately, that you deal with us on block. Does anybody have any objection to that? No. Okay, thanks. I'll hand the meeting over to John then.
Thank you, Chairman. So could I have a proposer for both Steve and Philip to be elected? Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? So all those in favour, please? Anybody against? Thank you. So therefore I declare that Philip and Stephen are duly elected. Thank you very much. Now, if I may, I'll hand back to the Chairman.
Right. I'm sure on behalf of Philip and I, we thank you very much for the confidence in re-electing us. And I'm sure we'll both be only too delighted to continue to do our best for Grimsby Town Football Club. If I can then move on to item 4, which is to reappoint Weaver Root as the company's auditors and to authorise the directors to determine their remuneration. Two elements to this. Weaver Root are by default reappointed auditors because no one sought to suggest that anybody else other than Weaver Root should be reappointed auditors. And then if we look on to their remuneration, can I have a proposer and a seconder please, that the directors have authority to agree remuneration? David? Seconder please. So, not unsurprisingly, those for and those against. Thanks very much. That quickly moves us on to item 5, which is any other business. As I've said many times, that is any other statutory business that has been notified that wants to be discussed at the annual general meeting. There is none. The only thing I would mention at this point is we did receive apologies from both Mike Chapman and John Wood, who are for various reasons not able to attend today. And although he's not a director, John Elson, the club's vice president, also asked me to give his apologies as well. So unless there's anything else that anybody would like to say regarding the statutory part of the meeting, I will declare the 126th annual general meeting closed. And once again, thanks ever so much for your attendance.
Now, of course. Yes, please, David.
The Cheshire Trophy,
yes.
Is the format in stone?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm sure it will be voted on again next year. That's the simple answer to that.
Yeah.
Do you have a further question to that, David?
No, is it the thin edge of a wedge to
Well,
get them youngsters teams into our league?
No, personally I believe, and I'm sure it's a united view, we debated this much at the last forum only 2 evenings ago, that it wasn't the Premiership who dictated this, it was the EFL who had a number of clubs complaining that were losing money, particularly in the early rounds. Most clubs clearly are in the early rounds, and there's only a few that go on to prosper from these competitions. There were a lot of complaints, and therefore the EFL were asked to freshen it up and come up with some ideas. Initially, they came up with approaching the Premiership and putting in under 21-year-old B teams, or whatever category they would fit. Cat 4 would it be? Cat 1? Cat 1, sorry. It sounded okay to me, and I was quite smitten by the idea. There was 3 board members there. We'd just come back into the league, and everything we heard seemed right and reasonable. We listened to everything that was put forward. We asked the various questions about, is this the thin end of the wedge? We were given assurances it wasn't, and that it was the EFL approaching the Premiership. We come away from that meeting, and frankly we were a little disappointed, because there clearly wasn't a done deal. The EFL then went to the Premiership, and Premiership teams were interested, and a number of them basically continue to be not interested, and those that were happy to engage wanted a slightly older age group, so it went to 23s and then ultimately 5 overage players. Now my concern was, right from the beginning, was that we wouldn't want call it a Premiership B team winning the competition. Frankly, the fact that the EFL didn't come back to the clubs and ask for their further approval of that, I was pretty upset about, frankly. And there was a lot of noise mentioned at the next meeting, and we actually led the line on that and expressed our disquiet to the EFL. But nevertheless, it's where it is, and of course the subsequent year, again, the bulk of clubs voted for it, including ourselves, quite frankly. And that's because we've had an absolute assurance that there will not be Premiership intervention in our ordinary competition. And as Philip mentioned the other night, and he might like to, come in on this one and give the facts, would you, Philip?
Yeah, the facts is, to admit any team into the Football League, the EFL, has to be a change of the constitution of the EFL, which requires, because it's a change of the constitution, 90% support from all the other clubs, all the other 72 clubs. So only 8 clubs have to vote against the proposal, and it's a dead duck. We would certainly always vote against that proposal. We have, obviously, as we've gone around the country and visited other clubs and at EFL meetings, spoken to other clubs, and we haven't yet spoken to one club that would ever canvass voting in favour. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas, because it would basically be a dilution of the Football League. So I think the answer quite clearly is it will never happen. Even though somebody said at the forum the other night, Glenn Hoddle was apparently on television suggesting that B teams ought to take part in leagues. That may be his suggestion. It won't happen, and perhaps it would be better actually if the Premier League used some good English players rather than so many foreign players, which would help the England football team.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, thanks for that, Dave. Any other questions, please? Yes, please.
Sorry, just one. I wasn't at the meeting the other night, so
Okay.
I don't know what it was discussed.
Okay.
But something I feel strongly about was when the girls had to show the bras,
Sure.
the away game. And I did read in the paper that the club's not taking it any further.
Okay.
Do you think that's a right
Okay.
not to
Well,
take it?
first and foremost, our club can't take it any further. I mean, what can we say other than support our supporters? Now, when this first came about, Stevenage tried to swerve the ball a little bit and suggest that intelligence coming from our club had a hand in their approach, which was absolutely not the case. Our club made a statement to say exactly what hadn't happened, what intelligence had been shared, and frankly it came under quite a lot of criticism from our fans. So the club was, I would call, pilloried.
Right.
And beyond that, the Mariners Trust took up the argument. We'd consulted with the Trust.
Yeah.
They took up the argument on behalf of the fans, and they took it to the EFL. Now the EFL responded, and frankly, it was a whitewash, it was a sham, whatever you want to call it. They put it to bed. Frankly, they don't have the ability to apply sanctions to Stevenage in any case. So they went through the motions as far as we can tell. We're not happy with the outcome. We're not happy with the fact that they circulated that letter without consultation with the football club. And frankly, yes, we are unhappy,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, the Mariners Trust took the complaint on and they acted on behalf of the fans.
It's just seemingly that the incident took place outside the ground and not inside the ground. And I mean, if your daughters were walking down Freeman Street and somebody come up to show us your bra, there'd be hell to play. And suddenly the football team can have every girl taking the grass off. It just sounds absolutely ridiculous that could happen.
It was, and there were also children, young children
Yes.
searched, which is totally against any
Yeah,
of
and I just cannot
the
believe that it's got away
regulations.
with as
Yeah.
simple as that. It's just saying it's finished.
Well,
Now, can I say that
Yeah.
John and I will be attending the next EFL meeting, which is
Yeah.
in February, and we are going to, and there'll be a Division 1 and 2 regional meeting,
Yeah.
and we are going to make our views very well known to the
That's
EFL,
fine.
and also our view that we are not happy with the way that they dealt with it. I think the main thing is what they said was they're not taking any action, but they didn't say why they're not taking
No,
any action.
no.
That leaves it completely open, and that is totally
I
unsatisfactory.
mean, it's
And
just
that's
the
why
same
we're
as
going to
going
take it
into a
forward.
theatre to see a show.
Yeah.
And everybody, all the girls over to I know it sounds daft, but it's a fact.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't want it to be my daughter, and you wouldn't want it to be your daughter, John,
Absolutely.
would you?
If there
That's
were
for
going to be
sure.
searches of that nature, intimate searches, they should be done a proper way,
Yeah.
in accordance with all the regulations that relate to the searching of spectators.
Was there any sort of apology from their club then? on
Not
that?
at all. No.
Well,
Not
this
at all.
is, you know, this is what I just can't get my head round.
Yeah.
They
I
can
think
do
we-
that at this height of things in football and just whitewash it and just get away with it. It just seems unbelievable to me.
Sure, totally agree.
It really does.
Totally agree. I particularly was very unhappy with the EFL, and again, like Philip
sure
said, we're
you were,
taking it up
yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
And the reason I was particularly unhappy was they put the statement out without consultation with the football club, and they actually sent a covering letter to say they'd done so, an email, and would Grimsby Town not make any further comment. So they're telling us about actually how to behave, which I was really upset about, and that if we were going to make a comment, could we clear it with their press office? Yet they'd put their press statement out already. Had they shown us that press statement, we would have took them to task straight away.
Yeah.
But the facts of the matter are, it was the Mariners Trust who took the complaint to the EFL, and they responded to accordingly. Now, of course, we're all unhappy about the situation. Should our football club make a statement or not, or should we leave it in the hands of the Mariners Trust, who are eloquent in acting on behalf of the fans?
Yeah.
You know, as far as we were concerned, I consulted with directors, and it was said, leave alone, it's being handled. So we didn't put anything out.
Yeah.
Now, we've been pilloried for not putting anything out. I use this word again because
Yeah.
the club's come under a lot of criticism
Sure,
lately
yeah.
for good, bad PR and no PR, or whatever you want to call it. You know, we did what we did. That's the way we did it. Now, what I would say, and not in defence of Stevenage, but football clubs have come under a lot of pressure lately. We're on heightened alert. You don't have to look at what happened at Manchester. We've got a number one grade in terms of our response and organisation, the way it's been set up in terms of that sort of issue. Nick Dale does a fantastic job in terms of looking after us in that regard. Now, just before the game at Stevenage, there were some special alerts sent out to football clubs, and they had to be on the guard. Whether that brought about this nonsense, this over-the-top reaction, I don't know. Is that mitigation? I don't think it's acceptable mitigation,
No.
but nevertheless, what happened was unacceptable, shouldn't have happened, and I do believe Stevenage should have come out and apologised.
Was that the only time they've done it, or had they done it previously? to
I'm
that?
led to believe that the previous year they were heavy-handed, but clearly this year they've gone one step further. Now, if you were heavy-handed last year, and then you got this higher alert that you had to stand up to, that you were responsible for, because quite frankly we were all under guard, all under notice, you could understand that they might then want to up the game. If they've done that, they've done it in the wrong way, and there's no apology, which is a sad state of affairs.
Yeah.
But it's not for this football club to apologise. It's Stevenage who got it wrong.
Yeah.
We get a lot of glowing reports from away fans of how our stewards have interacted with them.
Yeah.
Time and time again I see copies of letters sent to the football club. I've had them sent to me directly. I like to think that we're above that sort of behaviour, but sometimes you do need a robust approach when fans are behaving in certain ways. And there is one other thing to it, and there's no acceptable reason for Stevenage doing what they're doing. But we have got a nucleus of fans, it's a tiny minority who want to let flares off, who want to behave in certain ways. We've got, you know, we're not proud of it, but actually some of the highest banning orders in the whole divisions, and on percentage, we're probably at the top. So there's things we're not proud of, there's things we need to improve on, and a lot of the you know, the normal fans can do something to stamp this out. They, you know, some people will know who's taking flares in. Well, they want shouting down, don't they?
Yeah, of course
they want stopping,
of course
because they're dangerous. They could maim somebody.
There's a bit difference in me doing this. The lady wouldn't want to do that, would you, Dave?
No. There's no mitigation or answer, but we've got to be careful. The reputation we're gaining ourselves, and we've got to sometimes look at ourselves and say, is this the way to behave? We don't want to be number one for the wrong sorts of things.
Yeah.
So really, I think enough said on that, if that's okay.
John, the gentleman at the back.
We've got a gentleman here who wants to ask a question.
I do apologise.
If I could,
It's a follow-on, is it?
Just a quick couple of things. Well, one thing regarding what the gentleman just said. If around the time that it happened down there, people had studied social media better, I'm not getting at nobody in particular, you would find there was other clubs, people coming in and say, that sort of thing happened to us. We got this. My kiddie got searched. Not from this club, from other clubs.
Okay.
Stevenage are doing probably over the top, and they were well over the top with our fans.
Sure.
But they are doing over the top with a lot of fans. And there's a couple of other London clubs that are doing it. Whether it's because, as you say, it was put on high alert and they're panicking because of what's happened down London more than once, I don't know. But also, their stewards are not controlled by the club, like our stewards are.
Yeah.
They're brought in, heavy-handed men at times, I think.
Okay.
And just another quickie, if I could, when you do talk to people at the EFL and you've got some sort of satisfactory answer out of them, could we not have it put in the press so that the fans that are against, not only yourselves now, get told what has happened and what has been said to a group, you know, you can't say everything, I know that.
Well, I honestly think a private meeting, an expression of disquiet and a dealing with it doesn't need airing in public. You know, we've already had an airing in public recently.
The Matt
Dean Gate affair, for want of a better description. I think we've got to go about the business quietly and honestly and deal with it on behalf of the fans. Unless there's something sensational to report, I don't believe we'd be going public, frankly. And you know, the Mariners Trust haven't finished; they're still taking it on,
I know,
and rightly so. Rightly so. I mean, they're acting on behalf of the fans, and that's great. We're responsible for this football club, not the actions of Stevenage. Whether we should have put a statement of disgrace out or not is a, you know, it's history now. We didn't. I did ask various directors. And the view was no. It's been dealt with and handled well. So that's the position we're in, rightly or wrongly. So could I have your question, please?
Yes, extreme. I think at the forum the other night I heard some comment that within 24 hours there was going to be some sort of announcement of something they'd achieved eventually. Has that been made as yet?
Philip, would you like to come in on this one?
I couldn't announce it on Tuesday night. But in fact, although there was a press embargo, the BBC jumped the gun, and it was actually on the BBC website.
Not like the BBC. Broke the embargo, I think is the word, actually.
Yes. The position is they've been appointed by Sheffield City Council to the rebuilding of a ski village in Sheffield. It's a £21.4 million contract, the ski village alone, and in association there will be 500 to 600 houses built by Extreme as part of the enabling development for that ski project. The point I was making on Tuesday evening was that there had been a lot of criticism of Extreme. Who are they? Are they cowboys? We've been on Company's House. There don't seem to be much about them. Are they capable of delivering? Well, all I was saying is that is evidence that they gained the confidence of Sheffield City Council. They've entered into that contract, and as far as we're concerned, they are capable of delivering the project that we want. So that was the reason. So that is the project, a ski village in Sheffield, £21.4 million plus associated housing development.
I mean, there still are somewhat of a bit of mystery to me. I spent 40 years in finance, so I'm naturally a suspicious person. And there are so many companies open and close,
Yeah.
as you well know.
Yes. But no, we're satisfied that they can perform, and anyone who meets the director we meet with on a regular basis, Chris Lewis, will find that his enthusiasm is infectious, and he is desperate to see this project happen.
He absolutely is. If I can just add to that, I'm getting a little bit concerned about how much of an attack that Extreme are receiving actually on social media. They're being attacked right, left and centre. Following this announcement, those attacks basically haven't laid off. They've continued to have a go at Extreme and suggesting this project in Sheffield is Toy Town stuff, all sorts of different things. We've got to be careful how we behave towards people that we need to help us. That's the council, developers, the likes of Extreme. Very, very important material, frankly, to the delivery of relocation and on all of the good things that come with that, adjacent to the project the complex project that's being worked up. We clearly don't want to put them off, and my plea to everybody is please be patient, wait and see. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. I know we've not been able to say anything really positive politically. There's some key meetings this week that's happening. Philip's engaged in that. As a ward councillor for NELC, I've had to now stand back because of interest, really, declaration of interest. I've got to stand back and let these meetings with the council happen in my absence. Would I like to be there? Of course I would. But at the end of the day, it's prudent to stand back to avoid criticism and make sure that it's transparent and in order as public life has to be. But yeah, Extreme, we've got to give them a chance. They're really, really keen. They believe they can deliver. They've given us a good degree of confidence they can deliver. So my wish is that we just back off with the criticism, stop over scrutinising it. Developers at the end of the day, they make specific companies to deliver things. You can't always get to the bottom of call it the shell company or the holding company. So we know Alistair Goslin, the guy that owns the company. He's a man of wealth. He's got other businesses. There's an awful lot going on in that company and external to that company. So just don't look at it on face, and let's assist them to get on with hopefully enabling our delivery of a new home. Okay.
Sure.
Any other questions, please?
On Tuesday night, I believe there was Mr. Morley said he was moves afoot for going financing, but he couldn't have time to say it on Tuesday night on the radio. Do you want to let us know now?
Yeah, I can do. I mean, I did after Radio Humberside switched off their broadcast. I did actually do that to the continuing forum, which is it on Dale YouTube? I suppose if I summarise it, you have to be a little bit patient with me because I went through various elements. There was a message that we were trying to deliver out there, which is actually quite complementary to what John has just said with regard to Extreme, which I'm sure if you have a look at the back page of today's Telegraph is fairly obvious, but that's how things go. So if I can just maybe cover the ground again. What we really said in 2015 was that as part of the process to deliver the stadium complex, we had to demonstrate that we'd explored all avenues to look at the financial structure of obviously the development. So we were taking that opportunity to A, do that, and B, see if there was a general appetite for people to come along and invest in the club. Now, what we said was we would look locally, nationally and internationally. All offers, all options were on the table. If someone just wanted to come along and invest in the football club because they love Grimsby Town Football Club, whether they want a seat on the board or whether they don't, that's great. If the outcome of that was that there was someone who was genuinely interested in acquiring the football club, replacing all of us guys with a new regime, that'd be great as well. If it was best for Grimsby Town Football Club, then that's what we would do. The starting point, quite clearly, was that Philip and I excuse me, I do apologise. Philip and I are, with our professional connections, the ones that started the ball rolling. Philip it wasn't necessarily involved in the commercial legal field. Naturally, with my financial connections, I deal with a lot of financial institutions, the banks, finance houses, some of the big 6 firms of accountants. So I had contacts with people who were regularly involved in the purchase and sales of businesses. Philip, as senior partner with Wilkin & Chapman, they have a very, very active commercial legal department. He could use his connections both with that and with certain high-profile individuals locally to see what appetite there was for investing in the club. Basically, locally, we really didn't get much joy at all. We had a range of replies from certain high net worth individuals along the lines of, well, I've worked many years to accumulate my wealth. Do you really think I'm stupid enough to start and give it away? That was quite a common response. Some of the high-profile names that were bandied around from time to time, this person's definitely interested, that person's definitely interested. Forgive me, John, if John wasn't here, then those people would certainly come along. They weren't interested. Some of those people have other interests. They're not interested in football. You know, the whole of Grimsby doesn't, unfortunately, revolve around football. I wish it did, but it didn't. So we then thought, okay, now what do we do? We considered looking at businesses and enterprises that had a synergy and a connection with Grimsby. The food industry, for one. Clearly our main club sponsor is heavily involved in the food industry. So we looked at businesses and organisations associated to the food industry, including their, if you like, overseas counterparts, Iceland, Norway, all these sort of countries. We considered the renewables energy. Clearly there's investment both here and on the North Bank with firms that are developing the offshore wind farms. Would they be interested in helping the football club out and investing? It would be good for you to, you know, a lot of your employees will be football supporters. They'll be season ticket holders. It'll be good for your business to actually be involved with the football club. Now, I would say that the response we got from those was pretty much what we'd expect. Great. You know, we're quite happy to give you commercial sponsorship, advertising, corporate hospitality with the new facilities that we'll have at the new stadium, the sort of response you would expect from a commercial enterprise. But they were not interested in investing into the football club. We also then thought, well, where do we go from here? Now, what we basically did is we'd come into contact with someone who was a professional football financier. They made contact with us and they had connections with various football clubs around the country. They'd acted for the purchase and sale of football clubs. They'd acted for football clubs in finding outside finance. We decided that it was appropriate to commit to the expenditure. You know, this didn't come free. We had fees and costs to pay to be associated with it. But Philip and I were absolutely adamant that this was the way to go. We hoped that it would generate some response. We sat down and did what was we thought was a pretty good presentation to sell the case of Grimsby Town Football Club to potential investors. The firm concerned principally had contacts in the States, in the Middle East, France and one or two other European countries. Now, I don't know whether you remember, but at the 2015 annual general meeting I actually made a statement that we'd agreed to release at the AGM, that we had someone who we were actively talking to at the time and was actually interested in the club. In some ways, like John said, I would rather not have done that because you build up people's expectations. People don't believe what you're saying. They think it's just hype or spin, whatever you want to call it. I'm more from the school of when there's something definite to tell people, do it. But on the other hand, there's the expectation if you don't say anything for a few weeks that nothing's happening, that you're doing nothing. So we made the statement, and at that time I was quite hopeful and quite excited about the proposition they were putting to us. I'm not going to cover all the bits that I did on Tuesday night because I think I dealt with those. I think I've been pilloried publicly enough for saying it anyway, so I'm not going to go over all the ground again. But basically, we had a deal on the table for the acquisition of Grimsby Town Football Club by an American firm of venture capitalists. Now, a deal on the table isn't necessarily as delivering, and there were a lot of difficulties to overcome. This particular firm, they wanted exposure to football in the UK. I say the UK because they've been looking into Scotland as well. Apparently there was a deal on the table for a Scottish club. Whether that ever came to fruition or not,
No, it didn't.
I don't know, because quite frankly I'm not interested in other football clubs. I'm only interested in the one that I'm a director of. Now the basic point that we were at was we had a deal. There was an agreement as to how much would be paid to gain control of the club, which included John's loans, his share capital. I'm not going to go into the basics because that would be inappropriate. But basically, they were quite happy to proceed. The major stumbling block that we had at that point was that they did not want any fan involvement whatsoever in the share capital of the company. Now that, to us, was a major stumbling block. I used the word Tuesday night deal breaker, and it virtually was to us a deal breaker. You know, we want to actively encourage more people to have shares in the company and have a say. Particularly allied to the stadium development, I feel, and I think it's a view shared by my fellow directors, that this is an ideal opportunity coming up to increase fan ownership, and I use the word very strongly here, fan ownership of the club by way of shares. Now, there's various incentives and initiatives that we feel that we can promote when we've got something concrete to actually say, here it is folks, we'll move forward. I mean, to me, I think it's great that you walk in the stadium and you look around and say, well, this seat, you know, I actually bought this seat, I've got part of this stadium. It might sound rubbish, but I think that's quite genuine. Now, as I say, I wore them down, that sounds very arrogant. I'm not, but at the end of the day I did. I had a number of late night telephone conversations with their CEO and chairman, and I managed to persuade them that fan involvement was an important part, an integral part of acquiring this football club. We have 1,250 shareholders. Not all of those are sadly with us now, but probably 800 or 900 are active shareholders. You know, it is a vital part of the club. If they want to be involved in this club, then they had to embrace the idea that the fans were going to have an involvement as well. They agreed, and we then moved on to the heads of agreement. Now, I was a little bit concerned when we saw the first draft of the heads of agreement. We'd gone back to we want 100% of the share capital. Now, that didn't give me a very warm and rosy feeling. Telephone calls were exchanged and, oh, we'll put it back in again. As part of the process on that, we also set some key dates and criteria that we felt they had to meet. They failed to do that. So at that point, we became a little bit concerned, and we pulled the plug on that deal. There were other leads and contacts that we were considering at the time, but quite frankly, we were a little bit uneasy about them. We didn't think they had the solidity behind this one. Now, the other aspect of this is that it was that connection that brought about Extreme. It was their connection that said, we've got this lead, they're not interested in being involved in football. And there's a key difference here that I'm going to try and expand on. But they'd love to be involved with helping you bring the stadium relocation to fruition. So the efforts that we did have actually led to us having Extreme as our development partner. But the message that became clear is that there isn't the appetite, despite what people may think, there is not the appetite for people to come along and just invest in the football club. The structure that we have here doesn't lend the security of people to invest substantial sums of money unless your heart's in it. And that is the difference. With Grimsby Town Football Club, your heart is in it, not necessarily your head. And I look to my left there, perhaps as a pretty good example of that. Now, I was a bit controversial on Tuesday night, and I make no apologies for that whatsoever. I've spoken to two high-profile, high-net-worth individuals over the past couple of years or so, and I include John in this as well, who we felt would be serious investors in the club. And they turned around and said to us in no uncertain terms, no chance. There is no way that I'm going to put myself in the position of taking the abuse that you do. Now, I can read the headlines now, I can hear the old keyboards going. Director says it's the fans' fault for no investment in Grimsby Town Football Club. That's not what I'm saying. There are many, many, many reasons why people choose not to invest in football clubs. But there are far many more reasons why not to invest as why to invest. Well, the meeting then got a little bit out of hand after that. That's probably life. What I was trying to get over was perhaps that people ought to reflect when they do hurl the abuse, particularly at John, that it has consequences for the football club. Now, John and myself and Philip and the club have tried to get this message over, and it seems to be failing miserably. So that is really where we are with the investment. That is why, with giving 3 minutes to go prior to the end of the programme at 9 o'clock, I said I was quite prepared to explain the situation. I'm quite prepared to stand up and be pilloried alongside John so that people can actually see what support he is given. But it required explanation. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we're stopping looking for investment. We're continuing. We try regularly. But my firm belief is that outside of the people whose hearts are in Grimsby Town Football Club, you're not going to get significant external investment until the stadium project is up and running. You then have something tangible that people who want a return on their investment, I mean, John doesn't want a return on his investment. I mean, why would he do this? But people who do look at the cold facts, light of day, that they want to make money out of the development, until we have something concrete on the table, we're not going to get any interest. Now, hey, I'd love to be wrong. You know, if there's anybody out there that's got a few £1,000 burning a hole in the pocket, that they want,
£100,000,
or as Philip's just about to say, a few £100,000 in there, burning a hole in the pocket, and they want to come along and put the money into the football club, great. And if someone wants to say, well, have you spoken to this person, have you spoken to that person, we'll do that. But I think, unless Philip wants to contradict me on this, I think at this moment in time, looking at the club, where we're situated, as we're situated, with the infrastructure that we've got, then we've really run the well dry. Other than the fact, and I do stress this again, picking up on the point that John made, that, you know, our efforts brought about the contact with Extreme, and let's just hope that everything comes to fruition. So I've waffled on for quite a while, but and I do apologise. Well, I'm not going to apologise. I've waffled on for quite a while, but it was quite a long-winded explanation, quite a full explanation that I actually wanted to give the supporters. Now, whether at the end of the day people accept that, whether they believe what I'm telling them, I've got to the point, quite frankly, I don't care. I've told you what the situation is. That's where we are. Okay, thanks very much.
If you want an example of a club that has been taken over by American venture capitalists, who again insisted on no fan involvement, have a look at Coventry City.
Yeah.
They were taken over by venture capitalists when they were relegated, the season they were relegated from the Premier League. Venture capitalists thought it would be very easy to get them back in the Premier League, then sell on and make a lot of money. Coventry City are now in League 2 with us, and at the end of this season they are being booted out of the Arena and won't even have a ground. So be careful what you wish for, is what I say.
I think just to again maybe pick up on the point that Philip has made. I mean, I don't know whether you're interested or whether you're not, but I'll sort of throw this into the pot. When we started negotiations with them, they were actually actively looking for a championship club. They weren't interested in anything below championship level. But I think we actually did a pretty good job of marketing the club. Because bear in mind, at this time, we weren't in League 2, we were in the National League. And they were thinking, well, why would we be interested in a National League club? But we convinced them that the potential was here to develop, and it was a good avenue for them to get a foothold into the English game quite cheaply. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but comparing the cost of what it would be to gain control, the controlling influence, not 100%, but a controlling influence in a Premiership club, compared with a club that was going in that direction, it was a good deal for them. Now, as I say, unfortunately, it never transpired, and I'm sure there are many people out there who'll be saying, load of waffle, not true, etc. I can hear it. But believe me, I worked very hard over that. So, again, yeah, that's it.
I would fully agree with that, and I did ask the board, the wider board, basically if they would take this task on in my absence. And the reason for that is because I've had a lot of accusations of me, my loans, my shareholding, myself, putting potential investors off. So I asked for this exercise to be done separate of me, and it was clearly gone through rigorously. If I could just add to what Steve said about the American organisation that clearly wanted 100% ownership, their plan was predicated on buying a Scottish club first, without which Grimsby wouldn't happen anyway. They didn't actually execute that purchase, so the thing fell down in any sense. But obviously the board of directors were keen that there was fan involvement in some way, shape or form, and they weren't entirely put off by that. I think ultimately their plan failed, and Scotland didn't transpire, so therefore Grimsby ultimately fell away. Okay, any other questions, please? Okay, well, with that then, I'd like to thank you all for coming and bring the meeting to a close. And just before doing so, I would like to thank my directors. You know, obviously, I'm deemed to control the football club in an accounting sense. It's not a position I wished for or desire to have, but in accounting terms, there's an expression in the accounts that says I control the football club. So for obvious reasons, I predominantly get the blame for everything, but clearly the other night at the fans forum and the lead up to it, you know, I had people at my side, the directors who were stalwarts. They worked very, very hard behind the scenes, professional people in the case of Philip and Stephen, but we have John Wood on the board, Mike Chapman. They all contribute in different ways, and you know, as somebody that's deemed to control the football club, I would just like to thank them enormously for the backing and substance and work and effort that they put into the football club, in particularly assisting me, because it's not an easy task, so-called running a football club. It's not a dictatorship. We have a board of directors who basically are involved in all key decisions. Below that we have an operational staff. They're broadly peddling everything every day on our behalf. There's a few occasions when you get involved in things, it's usually because I akin it to basically holding a tiger's tail, and you don't know which way the head's going, you don't know what's coming next. That's a football club. People say that you can plan for it, you can route your way forward, but frankly with a football club things happen to you and you do have to react. And often you find yourself in front of the microphone not necessarily knowing the full picture whilst you're being asked to make comment. That's the nature of a football club. We know what we've inherited, we know what we've got, and I would just like to thank everybody for all of their support, and including speak favourably about the Mariners Trust. We clearly are keen on fan engagement. There's no doubt about that. Massive support from the board the Mariners Trust got in terms of its evolution and the position it's in today. Really pleased with that partnership. It's going great. Just in terms of scrutiny, this football club I think is the one and only PLC.
It's not the only, I'm not sure whether it's the only PLC now, but certainly I can't off the top of my head think of any other clubs that are PLCs other than us. Most of them are under private ownership, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not open.
I think we're the only one. Really what I'm saying by that is it gives further scrutiny way and beyond an ordinary business. You're here today, for want of a better description, holding us to account, asking us questions. You know, there's not been too many today, and I hope that's a degree of appeasement in the way that the finances are being handled. But we have the PLC status, we have supporters liaison officers, we have the Mariners Trust. The door's always open. My email address, my telephone number is there in public. I have numerous communications with fans on a regular basis. I never turn my back on it. There's only in the last week I've turned my back on 2 people who, frankly, I will not engage again because they've gone beyond a line, for want of a better description. But we are accountable. We do hold ourselves open for access to people, and we do answer openly and honestly. And subject to not harming the football club, we do let everything out. So I just wanted to put that position forward. You know, we are open and honest people, and sometimes, you know, the treatment we get is a little bit unfair, unfounded. And as I say, my directors at the side of me on a couple of nights ago at the Fans Forum, it was a breath of fresh air, but obviously it turned into a bit of a lambasting, which I think was frankly undeserved. We were shouted over, we weren't allowed to answer properly. And at the end of the day, it does make it difficult, where today it's been quite clear, you sit there respectfully, you ask your questions, and we answer as we do. And the AGM, you know, is a candle to how it should be, a beacon, for want of a better description. So thank you for your attendance, and look forward to seeing you next year. Okay, bye-bye.